I see the same discourse happen over and over and over again, and I wanted to make a comprehensive video really quick. We're going to try to be instructive for once, okay? We're going to make an effort, okay? We're going to do some community instruction. So have you ever heard of a guy called MrBeast? He's a big YouTuber. He recently came out with a video 1,000 blind people see for the first time. Basically, there's a very simple surgery that you can get to cure a condition which, if deteriorates, leads to blindness. There are lots of people in poorer countries, especially, but also some here in the West, who can't afford the procedure, so they just stay blind their entire life, even though you can spend like 15 minutes and $100 getting the cure. Insane stuff. A lot of his videos are basically just like, I have a lot of money, let's do a cool premise with it. And he also does a lot of philanthropy stuff. I gave my subscriber an island, $10,000 every day you survive prison. It usually ends with like, I have a lot of money and I gave it to somebody. He did a real life Squid Game being known for a good philanthropic organization in the show that it took place in, tournament, blah blah blah. So basically what we're looking at here is a kind of performative monetized philanthropy. Yes, his viewers are majority children. I have never watched a single MrBeast video. I don't know what his voice sounds like. I don't know how his face looks as it moves. I don't know how I would, because he does the same face in every thumbnail. I don't know. I've not even seen this video, but I know what he's doing broadly because of, cultural osmosis. And I wanted to talk super quick about two very important things: philanthropy and the Antichrist. So I want to talk about both those things. Because every time MrBeast has a big video come out, people talk about how there's something kind of sinister underlying his behavior. Have you seen this? Tell me if you have or haven't. I'm not bothering to get a range of examples. I've noticed some people seem somewhat uncomfortable with him, and a lot of them are lefties, which is interesting because I bet you that, like me, a lot of them haven't actually seen his content. So what are they getting upset about? The idea that a guy has money. I mean, we know people have money. The idea that he's using that money to do good things seems kind of weird. They'd be upset about that. I wanted to talk really quick about philanthropy and why lefties get uncomfortable by people like MrBeast, okay? Maybe there are people watching who don't necessarily know. Maybe you do know, but you like listening to my voice. Just follow through with me here for a second, okay? So the economic system that we live under right now, stop me if you've heard this one before, it's called capitalism. There are some conditions unique to it that just were not present in earlier economic models that were, common across the world. Here's an example of a really big difference, okay? The ways in which people who have wealth socially legitimize that wealth. So, for example, back 1,000 years ago, if you were like a king or a queen or a emperor, or even just a very, very wealthy merchant, there was usually a kind of imagined, often divine self-justification to power that people held. The idea that kings and queens were divinely chosen was kind of broadly, accepted, and oftentimes very wealthy people were considered to have been blessed or gifted by God. There was just a general divine right attitude to a lot of power, like, oh, well, why do some people get to have everything and some people nothing? Okay, well, divine power, blah, 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 It's like a very quick and easy justification. But as societies have become more and more concerned with the idea of social equity, like maybe things should be fair, maybe a little bit kind of, the idea of extreme amounts of wealth being concentrated in the hands of some people while other people starve has been seen as more and more of like something that has to be like addressed from an optics perspective, There have always been very wealthy and very poor people, but usually if you had like a king or a queen who made a big show of their opulence and their generosity, it wasn't really like an optics thing, like they would be considered a sort of bad or miserly person if they didn't. It was more a way of demonstrating their priorities as a ruler. Does that make any sense? Nowadays, however, the idea that ultra-wealthy people have to in some way contribute to the social good, that's actually a like well-accepted normative idea. In fact, it's so well accepted that Ayn Rand's writings and the philosophy, big quotes here, of objectivism was created in large part to rebuke that expectation. Objectivism suggests that there is a kind of natural goodness to greed. that the free hand of the market and natural human incentives guide people towards optimized decision making when greed is the thing leading their way. And for that reason, trying to force people to be like nice or generous actually interrupts that optimized decision making process. Ayn Rand's philosophy was that it was actually kind of sickening to expect wealthy people to donate a bunch of money or to like, be performatively charitable because their selfishness was actually the fuel driving the economy. Like you're essentially besmirching the stuff that our entire society is built on. Ayn Rand was a stupid asshole and a dumbass and stupid, and also survived on welfare and was also stupid. So we don't care what she has to say. Artemy! It's settled. Artemy is battling a cardboard box. I think the box is winning. Ayn Rand is stupid, like my cat, Artemy, but far less cute than my cat, Artemy. Editors, insert picture here. They don't have to actually do that. I don't normally ask them to do that. The point that I'm trying to get at now is that there is a kind of normative expectation that wealthy people in some way indicate that they are aware of the blessings that circumstances bestowed on them and to do something with it, Some of the most philanthropic wealthy people of our time are people like Bill Gates and George Soros. Now, I'm not going to get into, at least not right now, why people don't trust Bill Gates and George Soros' philanthropy. There are some legitimate reasons, and there are some very illegitimate reasons. Anti-vax sentiment and anti-Semitism, respectively, being the illegitimate ones. They have done a lot, certainly with their wealth, far more than MrBeast ever could, though I don't believe they made as large a YouTube channel off of it, so who's really winning? And, hey, Elon Musk. Elon Musk is not actually a philanthropic billionaire. He's relatively selfish, I'd say, for people who make a public name of themselves. But Elon Musk does benefit from the optics of philanthropy, like donating Starlink to Ukraine after the invasion, which he then rescinded and then had them pay for upkeep on, and then told them they couldn't use it in the Donbass or Crimea. He often tries to come across as that kind of like Tony Stark billionaire, where all of his, genius and his investive ingenuity are actually to everyone's benefit, and like the Hyperloop. He does kind of come across like somebody who's gifting the world his genius, doesn't he? Like he isn't. He's just a businessman, and everything that he does, he gets paid for. But he does try to give that image, doesn't he? Like that's something he's trying to bank on. It's an optics thing. Like that time that he was so desperate to help save those trapped kids in the cave. Remember the diving cave that he came up with an impractical solution that was rejected by a diving expert. Then he called that diving expert a pedophile because he was so upset that he didn't get to play hero. You remember? Stuff like that. Philanthropy. The idea of using your tremendous wealth for good. I don't think it's a bad thing. The problem that a lot of lefties have with philanthropy, as a rule, even if the outcome of that philanthropy is good, is that it is often considered to be a kind of last defense mechanism for the inequities of capitalism. This falls in line with the conservative attitudes towards charity. Have you ever seen that conservatives, despite believing that humans are naturally greedy, they seem very confident that charity will solve a bunch of social problems that they have no interest in using policy to solve, even though charity has not yet solved those problems, despite charity having been a thing for all of human history? You hear this about like poverty and homelessness and such. It's like, okay, well, we don't need policy solutions to these people suffering. Charitability will help. But obviously it doesn't fix the problem because we've always had charity as a concept and these problems still exist. So what's the issue there, right? Well, the issue is that when that line comes up, an appeal to charity is being made as a way of painting over existing issues. You have a long-standing inequity that conservatives do not care about, but rather than address it, they give you a potential fake solution. Charity does good, but charity doesn't solve issues because charity doesn't address the underlying mechanisms that create a problem. Even if you had enough money running through charity that you could give free breakfast, lunch, and dinners and beds to every homeless person in the city, charity can't actually fix homelessness because the system that fixes homelessness, that is to say housing first initiatives, where you give homeless people like a small house where they can shower and keep their stuff safely and mark a residence to so they can get a job, That can't really be done through charity. Charity can't really like maintain that level of care over people. The state can. The state is capable of this. But that would require taxpayer dollars, which requires, public investment, rather than just sort of like waving your hand and deferring to charity. So, charity and philanthropy, which is basically just large scale performative charity, are both good in their immediate outcome, but dangerous in the stuff they potentially normalize. For example, I say that people have legitimate reasons to distrust the philanthropy of Bill Gates and George Soros. Well, George Soros has, for all his reputation as a progressive, lefty, secret communist billionaire who actually helped the Nazis because Nazis were communists and communists were Nazis, in reality, his incredible wealth has gone towards, among many other things, initiatives which work to spread the influence of Western corporations and capital investment in countries that didn't have them previously. He was one of the people responsible for cultivating the shock doctrine in the post-Soviet states, which led to their very, very rapid neoliberalization and thus corruption, desperate poverty for millions and millions of people. Yeah, he did eventually realize that his policies were causing harm and put a stop to it, but I mean, I think that sucks. Bill Gates has seen widespread criticism for the way in which his philanthropy has helped in Africa in particular, the way in which, the systems with which he has promoted medicine and health with his Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, some people have accused, fostered a dependence on private philanthropy rather than a call for public investment. See, when a billionaire looks at a social problem and says, oh no, don't worry, I'll handle this, dependency is fostered on that billionaire, something which historically is not a very good thing. Historically, problems have arisen from this, and it can often direct attention away from possible public investment. It means that, oh, you don't need these investments, these reforms, this initiative, because a single very wealthy person is funding a philanthropic organization which will do the work for you. And what this leads ultimately is the opposite of what we want, which is more private control of social systems that are meant to improve people's lives. That's actually the wrong direction to go in. You understand? Like, the problem we're getting at here, the inequities we're talking about, are fundamentally a product of private control of the means of production. If you're a funny thing called a socialist, you are aware of the fact that a great deal of the economic inequality in our world is a product of the distinct relationship between workers and owners. People who, and thus control, resources and the means to access, refine, and sell those resources. Workers, the people who live off of the labor that they sell to owners as a way of refining, selling, and so on the products that they have ownership over. And if your solution to problems caused by that system is to hand additional control over to private organizations, philanthropic or otherwise, to solve the issue, you're actually contributing to the problem in the long run. You're doing the exact same thing, you understand? This is the issue that people have with MrBeast. Is MrBeast like directing wealth and resources away from public health by doing this video? No. Objectively, no. That is not the case. MrBeast probably is doing no harm here. Is he secretly a weird guy on his own? Yes, he's a YouTuber. That's objectively yes, that's correct. He's not like undoing any drive for public investment in broad like optical healthcare. Okay, that's it. That's not really happening here. But I think the caution that people feel, like the hesitance, I think that's a very legitimate thing. You understand? I think Hassan said in a clip that when he watches this video, he feels rage, not because of MrBeast, but because of the idea that as a product of our system, you have people being blind for life because they can't get a very basic, very quick, very cheap procedure, which doesn't even make sense from an economic perspective, because a worker who is blind is economically crippled. They can't really produce or contribute to society in the same way a sighted person can. It would make economic sense, even from the perspective of the harshest utilitarian capitalist, to ensure that every worker could see, at least if allowing them to see required so cheap and simple a procedure. But that isn't what happens, because our system isn't rational. No system, economic or otherwise, has ever operated in a perfectly rational sense, where it attempts to maximize every individual variable within its own equations. But capitalism, I think, is unique in the extent to which it, if you like this guy called Karl Marx, it sows the seeds of its own destruction. It produces the own contradictions that will lead to its. Thank you for the link, guys. I was getting to it. That will lead to its downfall. Inshallah. MrBeast brought this up himself. I don't understand why curable blindness is a thing. Why don't governments step in and help? Even if you're thinking purely from a financial standpoint, it's hard to see how they don't ROI on taxes from people being able to work again. A perfectly sensible point. I agree. Also hard to see, nice pun. Yes. Hopefully you all understand where I'm coming from with this. Philanthropy is not inherently bad. It's just dangerous, and it potentially normalizes a lot of really destructive social tendencies. For literal centuries, a lot of really bad policies have been made on the backs of the wealthy have our interests in mind and we should trust them. From public investment to which corporations to trust, to the reputations of individual wealthy people, millionaires and billionaires who have banked incredible harm on their ability to control not only the means of production, but also people's goodwill. They might exploit their workers and extract $100 million a year in excess labor from their employees, but they donate 2% of that. So actually, they're a humanitarian genius. There's a kind of new version of this, a kind of like updated, post-cryptocurrency attitude towards philanthropy. I think it was called, we saw it in one of those Kurzgesagt videos, the billionaire crypto guy who got arrested recently subscribed to this ideology. Effective altruism, yeah, which I've been told has a number of definitions, but there is a definition of effective altruism, which is essentially ultra-wealthy people making as much money as they can is actually a good thing because wealthy people have the greatest business acumen, and they're the ones who are best in a position to decide how to charitably use that money. So actually, if you're like a super-duper humanitarian guy, the best thing you can do is become a billionaire by exploiting the labor of hundreds of thousands of people, because now that you have that money, you are uniquely talented at distributing it in a way that benefits people. Obviously, this is just the most unabashed, like, naked theory for justifying, the unequal accumulation of capital since Randian objectivism. It's Randian objectivism with a smiley face drawn on it. It's essentially the greed and unmeted drive of the ultra-wealthy is actually to our social benefit, because they are the ones who, in Randian objectivism, turn the wheels of our economy, and under effective altruism, who have the right mind to do well with that money. They're the investor. They're the one smart enough to make that money. Why do you think the government should be the one to spend it on helping the poor? Well, the answer for that is because by every metric we have, the government's better at doing it. By far. Private charitable organizations just historically do not do a good job of fixing systemic issues, and often perpetuate it by driving attention and resources away from public investment. Also, a lot of people say MrBeast is the Antichrist because MrBeast comes across as very performatively good, and people like to call people who are that the Antichrist sometimes. Like, hey, he's acting really good, but what if actually he's bad? It's a very high-level literary analysis that only very smart and high IQ people would make. So, if you don't understand it, that's okay. Sub to my channel, guys. Please? 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 You like that? I can do that on command.